She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull. I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know, and she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find.
My hair is really bothering me, so we're just gonna throw it up real quick in the messiest of buns, and yeah. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Y'all got just a regular pot of coffee for today's intro because Bella is sleeping and the espresso machine always wakes her up. Lately, I don't know why it does. It never did before, but yay, parenthood. I just brewed a regular pot of coffee for the intro and obviously tried to make it look interesting, but it's just a regular cup of coffee, which is still really, really excellent. Before we get started, let's talk about our sponsor today, which is one of my favorite sponsors ever, and it's Magellan TV. I love Magellan TV. When you've run out of everything to watch on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and TV, and you're a documentary lover and a history lover and a true crime lover and a life lover, like I know all of you are, Magellan TV is going to be your go-to. And at this point, in the past couple of weeks, it is my go-to now over Netflix and over Hulu, because it's literally just a place where there's all documentaries and I'm in my glory. I'm in heaven. Today we're talking about the outcome of Sidney Moore's retrial, and I really wanted to give you guys a recommendation for a documentary. It's called Caught on Camera, and there's 6 episodes in it, and it kind of relates to what we're talking about today, which you'll find out in a little bit why, but there's 6 episodes to it. It's all about crimes and things that have been caught on camera, which I love because I love seeing the actual surveillance footage. Like when there's a case that has surveillance footage involved, I'm always, like looking at it and analyzing it, and it's so much fun to do. So I definitely recommend that. There's over 2,000 documentaries, and they're adding more all the time. They're all streamed in 4K for no additional cost. They're all ad-free for no additional cost. Some streaming services, if you pay a certain amount, you can get the documentaries, but you have to pay more if you want them ad-free. That's not the case here. You can stream them to your Roku, your Apple TV, your phone, your tablet. So basically, you can watch Magellan TV anywhere. If you're sitting in the doctor's office and you're waiting for 35 minutes, like every time I go to the doctor's office, just pop in your earphones. And earphones? Do people wear earphones anymore? Pop in your earbuds or earphones, whatever you're wearing, and watch a documentary and enjoy yourself and learn something while you're wasting 35 minutes waiting at the doctor's office, even though if you showed up 35 minutes late, they would charge you a late fee. But that's a talk for another day. Not only do they have documentaries on true crime, they have documentaries on history and science. There's documentary movies and documentary series and just everything to choose from. You'll never get bored. You'll never run out of stuff to watch. So if you're interested in trying it out, Magellan TV is offering you guys a 1-month free trial period to check it out, see if it's something you like. I think it definitely will be. If you try this service out, you're not gonna wanna not use it anymore because it's amazing. But go in the description box, click on the link, and you can get your first month free if you use the link in my description box. Thank you so much, Magellan TV, as always, for sponsoring, and thank you guys for watching. Let's move on. Okay, so yes, today I am literally a mess. I'm wearing a sweatshirt. My hair has been bothering me all day, so I threw it up in a bun. Halloween's coming, guys. Halloween's coming. And for the last month and a half to 2 months, nobody's seen me. Nobody's heard from me. I've been very MIA on social media. My own family, like my siblings and my parents, are like, do you think you're always going to be this busy? Like, when are we going to see you again? It's been a very busy last couple of months because I've been getting prepared and getting ready for Halloween, but it's going to be so worth it. And actually, I can say I truly enjoyed it, even though I was busy all the time. I was busy looking into things that were really interesting. So I can't wait for you guys to watch. Halloween season is upon us. Today, we're talking about Sidney Moore. So if you're not familiar with the Heather Elvis case, I did a video on my channel about Heather Elvis. I feel like it was so long ago. It was probably one of the first true crime videos I did on my channel. And I'm not going to go over everything about the case because you can watch that video and it will explain everything for you. But essentially, Heather Elvis was dating this guy, Sidney Moore. She was much younger than him. He was older. He had a wife. He had 3 kids. And his wife found out about it, started threatening Heather. Heather pulled away. Some people said that Heather might be pregnant. And then all of a sudden, Heather disappeared. So obviously we know, given the evidence, or we thought, given the evidence, that Sidney Moore and his wife Tammy were responsible for kidnapping and most likely killing Heather Elvis. They went on trial for this separately. Tammy was already sentenced to 30 years for the kidnapping of Heather Elvis. Now, Sidney Moore did also go on trial for this in 2016, but he had a hung jury. So basically, the jury couldn't make up their minds about what they thought, and he had to be retrialed. So his retrial just happened this past couple of weeks. Sorry for my voice. I've also been sick, and so I am losing my voice. At the time of his new trial, Sidney Moore was already serving 10 years for obstruction of justice, which impeded the investigation into Heather's disappearance. He got this conviction after it was discovered that he lied about making a call to Heather from a payphone on Seaboard Street, but they found surveillance footage that showed it had in fact been him calling her that night, the same night she disappeared. So the retrial starts with the prosecutor telling this story about a little boy who's fishing. And then this older seasoned fisherman comes up to the little boy and he's like, "Hey, I hold the world record for catching the biggest fish." And the little boy says to him, "That's awesome. I aspire to be like you. Can you show me the fish, or can you show me pictures, or can I talk to people who were with you when it happened?" And the fisherman was like, "Yeah, actually, I don't have any of that. I burned all the pictures of it and I cut the fish up for bait, and all my crew that was with me, I don't know where they're at or even remember their names. In fact, I can't even show you the ship or the boat that I caught this fish on because I sunk it in the harbor." So the little boy's like, "Okay, so you just want me to believe that you caught this fish on your word." So as the little boy's walking away from this interaction, disappointed, he runs into another fisherman, and the fisherman's like, "Hey, little boy, I actually do hold the record for catching the world's biggest fish, and here's the Guinness Book of World Records to prove it to you. There's my name, this is me, and, I have proof." The prosecutor then goes on to ask the jury, "Do you think after all of this, the little boy still thought that the first fisherman, actually was the one who held the world record for catching that fish?" Of course not, because he was using logic and common sense. He used the evidence that was presented to him to make a determination of common sense. He used the circumstances, the fact that the fisherman only had his word and no evidence to support his story. The old fisherman altered, deleted, or destroyed every piece of evidence in his custody or control. But what he couldn't alter, delete, or control was the Guinness Book of World Records because it was not in his possession or control. The prosecution then says to the jury, "That's what we're asking you to do. Use your logic and common sense in determining whether Sidney Moore is guilty for kidnapping Heather Elvis." The prosecutor said, "We're going to show you circumstances that Sidney and his wife Tammy conspired and planned to kidnap Heather." So in these opening statements, prosecution's pretty much trying to set the stage that all they have is circumstantial evidence, which is fine. He even goes on to say that most cases tried in criminal court are tried using circumstantial evidence. They don't have physical proof that Sidney and Tammy kidnapped Heather, but what they have are a bunch of undeniable circumstances that pretty much say there's no other choice or option of what could have happened to her. Prosecution alleges that he would love to show you physical evidence, but Sidney and Tammy did such a good job of destroying, altering, and deleting any evidence that was left. However, the prosecution does say that they do have some evidence that Sidney and Tammy were unable to destroy because they did not have it in their control. The prosecution laid it out, so here are the circumstances. Mid-2013, Heather Elvis met Sidney Moore at the Tilted Kilt in Myrtle Beach, where Heather worked and Sidney functioned as a maintenance man. They proceeded to have a relationship even though Sidney was married to Tammy. Sidney begins showing up at the Tilted Kilt even when he's not working to bring Tammy things like coffee and bagels, and their relationship is pretty much a secret to no one that she worked with. When they aren't together, they're in constant contact via texts and calls. The Moorers could do nothing about the existence of these phone records because they weren't in their control. They weren't able to alter, delete, or destroy them. But Heather and Sidney's relationship stopped abruptly when Tammy found out about the affair and contacted Heather, threatening her to stop all communication with her husband. Tammy, at the same time, is basically putting Sidney under lock and key. She took his cell phone. He wasn't allowed to have it. She started going with him to work. She was having him followed. And she handcuffed him to the bed at night. I said it in the first video, and I'll say it again. If you don't trust your husband to the point where you feel you have to handcuff him to the bed at night, so that if he has to get up and pee or get a drink of water, you would have to unlock him, you should find a new husband. It's not the right relationship for you. It's okay. There's plenty of fish in the sea. And what's worse is Sidney completely submits himself to these restrictions and allows his wife to take his phone as a grown man and allows his wife to handcuff him to the bed and follow him to work, which kind of shows you that he doesn't have the best judgment and he would almost do anything to keep Tammy happy and keep her off his case. And Heather realizes this is over. She doesn't want the drama, She moves on. She hangs out with friends. She starts dating, but before long, she suspects that she's pregnant. And her coworkers and friends will testify to the fact that she actually did take a pregnancy test, but it came back invalid. Her manager at the Tilted Kilt, who was in control of giving her her uniforms and things, also says that she went up several bra sizes during this time and several uniform sizes, which shows that she was gaining weight. And while all of this is happening, Sidney and Tammy, they're going on with their marital bliss where she has to tie him up at night so he can't leave the house and keep his cell phone from him because she loves him so much. They're buying a new Ford F-150. They're taking their 3 kids to Disneyland. They're just having a great time. By the way, Sidney and Tammy are like abnormally huge Disney fans to the point where I think it's a little unhealthy, but I love Disney as much as the next girl. I grew up with it. Little Mermaid's my jam, but the way that they are obsessed with all things Disney. When they get back from this trip, Heather is still not making an effort to contact Sidney. In fact, she's absolutely terrified of Tammy. Her coworkers played a prank on her once where they said Tammy had called and it was going to come in, and Heather was so terrified that she had like a mental breakdown and she had to go home. And it was actually Heather who asked Tammy to stop texting her, to stop contacting her, pretty much saying, listen, I'm not talking to your husband anymore. Stop harassing me, because Tammy would continue texting Heather things like, oh, your daddy doesn't have a phone anymore, talking about Sidney, and, just constantly berating her just to torture her. And Heather said to Tammy, stop contacting me. It's over. I'm not doing anything anymore. I haven't talked to him. Leave me alone. Even though later, Sidney would claim when he lied to the police about making that payphone call that he had called Heather from that payphone to tell her to stop stalking him because she was leaving notes on his car and she wouldn't leave him alone. But there was absolutely no evidence that Heather continued to speak or talk to Sidney after being told by his wife not to. The prosecution laid out what happened that night, the night of Heather's disappearance. They show surveillance footage of both Tammy and Sidney driving to a Walmart, parking in a handicap spot. Sidney goes in and buys a pregnancy test for 88 cents. When he gets to the register, he also buys a box of cigars and he pays for his total in exact change, cash. Then he and Tammy drive to a Circle K parking lot, which is completely empty. They park across the street, not in the empty parking lot. Sidney walks across the street and calls Heather from the payphone. Now, both Tammy and Sidney have their cell phones on them right now. Well, Tammy probably has both her and Sidney's cell phones because he's not allowed to have his, but regardless, both of those cell phones are in the F-150 at this point while he's walking into some secluded parking lot to call Heather from a payphone. They have a 4-minute conversation, and when he gets off the phone, he walks back across the street to the truck. Now, after Heather gets off the phone with Sidney, she calls her friend and roommate, who was out of town at this point, visiting family back in New York, and she has a quick conversation with her. She gets off the phone, and then she calls that payphone back 9 times. Now, the prosecution says she didn't know this was a payphone. How would she know? She probably just thought that Sidney had used somebody else's cell phone or had gotten a new cell phone. He didn't tell her he was calling from a payphone. So she calls the payphone back 9 times. And when she gets no answer on that payphone, she calls his cell phone. For 2 months, her cell phone had not called his cell phone. But now, after calling that payphone 9 times, she calls his cell phone. And directly after that, she gets in her car and she drives to Peachtree Boat Landing. So this is a boat landing. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere in Myrtle Beach. There's no reason to be at a boat landing in the middle of the night. And this was 4 o'clock in the morning. So there's no reason for her to have gone there besides if somebody had called her and asked her to meet them there, like Sidney Moore. Not to mention, Sidney and Tammy, they live right down the street from Peachtree Boat Landing. After this, Heather's phone dies, and she's never heard from again, and then her car's discovered at Peachtree Boat Landing. But we do see a residential security camera, so something on somebody's house, pick up a Ford F-150 that looks exactly like the one that belongs to Tammy and Sidney Moore, drive from the direction of their home towards the direction of Peachtree Landing. So they would be driving down Highway 814 or Highway 814, which is Mill Pond Road, from the direction of their house going towards Peachtree Landing. And basically the prosecution sets it off like there was really no other destination that they would be able to get to, or there was no place that they would be going besides Peachtree Landing, driving in that direction. But I'm not sure if that's true. Either way, the residential security camera picked up their truck, or one that looked like their truck, driving by and going towards Peachtree Boat Landing at like 4 o'clock in the morning. After her disappearance, the day after her disappearance, like the morning after, Sidney and Tammy wake up and their marriage is as if Heather never happened. Like the affair never happened. He has his phone back. He's not being locked up at night anymore. He's not being followed to work. And why would that have happened unless Tammy felt comfortable enough knowing that Heather was out of the picture, and that Sidney had proved to her in some way that he was faithful to her and only her, and loved her and only her, possibly by colluding together to kidnap his ex-girlfriend and kill her, allegedly. I'd have to say most of what was covered in the trial was stuff we already knew. You know, you've got the fact that Sidney completely denied that this truck was his, and then he says, well, if it was my truck, I wasn't in it, you know, so now he's kind of like hedging his bets and kind of saying, well, if they can prove it's my truck, they can't prove that it was me in it. And in fact, they definitely couldn't prove that it was him in it at 4 o'clock in the morning, driving from the direction of his house towards the direction where Heather Elvis would vanish. But I mean, once again, logic and reason. We have to use our brains when we're thinking about something like this. However, new stuff that I hadn't known about was never before seen footage of Tammy and Sidney washing their truck the day after, or within a couple of days after Heather disappeared. And they were washing, like deep cleaning this truck. And then the rags that they used to clean the truck were thrown into a burn pile and then burned. So I don't think that's common practice. Like when I wash my car, I'm not like, oh, I need new rags after this, so I'm just gonna burn these. It's not common. You don't usually do that. You usually would throw them in the washing machine and then use them again. But Sidney and Tammy washed their car so thoroughly and then burned the rags that had been used to wash the car, which is incredibly suspicious. There's also footage of Tammy searching her yard a couple of days after Heather went missing with a mirror, looking for like bugs or surveillance devices. This new evidence was considered imperative for the jury's final decision of coming back after only 2 hours of talking about it and saying that Sidney Moore was found guilty of kidnapping Heather Elvis, and he too was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The downside of Sidney's conviction is the lack of closure for Heather's family. They really want to know what happened to her. They really want to know where she might be, and if she is dead, they can give her a proper burial. Heather's father, Terry, said, I don't see this as a victory, just another step in a process that has taken nearly 6 years. And Heather's mother, Debbie, said, he's still holding her hostage from us. Sidney more addressed the court. He did not get on the stand in his own defense, but afterwards he did address the court, and he said, "If I could give them closure, I would. I have children of my own. I get it. There is just nothing I can give them." Essentially, it seemed as if Tammy and Sidney legitimately thought that Heather was pregnant with his child. And they knew that this would most likely end their marriage and the happy family they were trying to project to the world because, yeah, a girlfriend, an affair, you can get over that. But when this girl is now walking around with your husband's child, this becomes a much more complicated situation. It's believed that Sidney bought that pregnancy test before they went to meet Heather with the intention of forcing her to take it so they could find out whether she was pregnant or not. And then if it came back positive, there was really no other option than to get rid of her. In a world where Heather Elvis existed, especially with a baby of Sidney's, they most likely felt that they would never have peace or happiness. I think it's very understandable why the jury came back and found him guilty of kidnapping. Also very understandable why they came back and found Tammy guilty of kidnapping earlier. And I will post a link to my video, my Heather Elvis video, if you want all the specifics, but it was a really crazy case. I definitely think everybody knows that these two people killed her. However, if they'd brought murder charges up against them, they would have been so much harder to prove considering that there's no body, there's no physical evidence, and it's so much harder to prove a murder case with circumstantial evidence than it is, to prove a kidnapping case. Even considering that a logical person would say, well, if he's guilty of kidnapping her, where is she? Most likely he didn't keep her alive. She's not being kept alive somewhere. So I think the prosecution picked the right charges to bring him to court with. And in the end, I feel like the only way we'll ever have closure to this is if Tammy and Sidney, now separated and serving time in two separate prisons, not together, if they ever come to the point where they would turn on each other. There's always the potential when people go to prison that they find God and they want to be, cleansing their immortal souls. So somebody might come forward out of the goodness of their heart. Doubtful. That's doubtful. The only way I think we could ever find out anything from either Sidney or Tammy is if one of them is given a deal of early release in order to turn on the other. And if that's the case, I don't even think I would be completely against one of them getting early release in order to turn on the other so that Heather's family can find closure and have their daughter back and we know what happened exactly. They do have 3 kids, and 30 years is a long time when you think about the fact that you won't see your kids graduate from high school or college or get married or have babies. So hopefully one of them or both of them are motivated enough to try to throw the other one under the bus so that they can potentially get home and be with their kids, even though honestly neither one of them deserves to be home with their kids if they are responsible for what happened to Heather Elvis. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, would you guys be on board for one or both of them turning on each other so that the Elvis family can find out what happened to their daughter? Or do you think that they're better off to just stay there for the next 30 years and nobody ever hear from them again? I feel really bad for Heather's family, and I feel bad for Sidney and Tammy's children who lost not one but both of their parents because their parents are such idiots and can't function like normal human beings who are married and go to counseling or get a divorce. Whatever. You don't kidnap a girl and kill her so that you can continue on in your happy marriage with the threat completely taken out. It's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody should think like that. Nobody should act like that. And, I feel bad that their kids had to lose their parents. But I definitely think, Tammy and Sidney are obviously in the right place. They're clearly unstable and dangerous people. All right, guys, so that's going to be it. Halloween starts tomorrow. So exciting. So exciting, guys. I'm exhausted and spent and just, completely my brain is full of oatmeal, but Halloween is going to be awesome. It's been so much fun. The next month is going to be awesome. Awesome? I said awesome 2 times, in a row? Huh. I am personally going to be out of town from the 1st to the 4th of October because I'm going to be in LA for something that I'll share with you guys soon. Follow me on Instagram so that you can check out what I'm doing in LA. So if you're not following me on Instagram yet, go ahead and do that so you can see what's going on. But I'm going to be in LA, but I will be in the comment section of the videos. There will be 3 videos posted the first week, and actually the first one, I said I was going to do shorter videos, like 30 or 35 minutes, but the first one's an hour and a half, so, you know, just keeping it real. Thank you guys so much for being here. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe so you can be here when Halloween happens tomorrow. And hit the like button if you liked it. And let me know in the comments what you think about this whole crazy situation. Stay kind and stay beautiful. And I'll see you next time tomorrow for Halloween. So exciting. Oh my God, that was so high pitched. Bye.